they really got beat down by the
That's
Ravens.
the worst part of it, right? Like, even if they lost, I don't think anyone expected that.
Yeah, they lost by like 4, and it was within a score. Even if it was 2 scores of like 10 points, but the fact you went out there and it was like that in that fashion, that like, hey, like, you guys didn't perform to your best for much of that game, but also like that's kind of on you and also the Ravens at the same time, if not more so the Ravens, because again, as much as they just maximized they created those opportunities and they took advantage of them. Like, so that's why like I see like stats like, oh yeah, the Niners had more yards than the Ravens, stuff like that. But yeah, but they pretty much created the turnover. You can have your yards, but look at the turnovers that they're getting. The turnovers that they're getting is phenomenal, and then they're taking advantage of it. They're keeping the ball away from the four. It's just, it just was so much maximizing opportunity by them. They were on it, and, tip of the cap to them.
Do you think that if the 49ers, because it feels like this wouldn't be a game, like if they face the Ravens, they're going to have to like, we're scrapping all of this. None of this worked. We're reformatting our game plan from the ground up. Do you think that the 49ers, if they were to play the Ravens, could win again? Like, when you look at that game, do you see the 49ers just aren't in the same class as the Ravens, or do you see the Ravens just won that day?
They're in the same class, and the Ravens won that day for sure. Like I said, I think now the Ravens, like, really, that was a huge statement win for them. Like, they were already like really good and considered serious, but that one was like, whoa. That one kind of put them on a new, like, okay, like, hey, Niners, there wasn't a fat gap between you and the rest of the league, because that's what I thought it was. Hell, last week we saw the Ravens didn't look that dominant against the Jaguars. So it's like, shoot, okay, like I always thought it was
going to beat up against the Jaguars. So
I thought, and to me, I always thought it was going to be, I thought the Niners were going to win this game, but it was going to be like a tough, gritty one. And I did see like a nice little segment thinking like, oh, who the hell are the Ravens? Like, okay, like, relax. You guys are getting way too cocky as fans. Like, look at this. Like, they are a good team because, number one, they have Lamar Jackson. Okay, so they already win the quarterback disparage there. And
people were debating that going into this game. People were like, oh no, Brock Purdy is as good or better of a quarterback.
I got told this week that
I heard someone say that they thought Brock Purdy was better than Lamar Jackson.
I believe it because I had several people telling me that Brock Purdy's better than Patrick Mahomes. So they all had Brock Purdy as their profile picture, which is kind of weird in itself. But I digress. Yes, the 49ers can beat the Ravens if they meet again. It's just, I think this one now they'll know what to expect, and maybe the Ravens like expose a little bit what the 49ers did. Because that's the thing. It was like the blueprint, like how Nick Bosa said, the blueprint out there on the Eagles is doable to defend against them. And now the blueprint might be out on the 49ers, but the problem is defenses don't
I disagree with that. I disagree with that.
What the Ravens have. No, because me and you talked about this after, hey, did the Browns lay the blueprint? And I was like, no, they didn't, because who has an elite defense like that? And sure, like the Vikings and the Bengals ended up beating them, but it wasn't in the fashion that they beat that the Browns did. So no one's done what the Browns did and make the 49ers look that mediocre until the Ravens. Again, because even the Vikings and the Bengals game, like the offense wasn't great, but they didn't look like as bad as they did in this game or as bad in the Browns game. I feel like those were like 2 really bad losses as opposed to the other ones.
I agree. I just feel like unless your game plan is make Brock Purdy, I guess it's rattle Brock Purdy, like make him lose his composure, because if they still like throwing 5 interceptions is just not a game strategy that like another team can be like, I'm gonna write this in the playbook. Like everyone's gonna, but I guess
no one has a talent like the Ravens either. Who's gonna do that to them? The Eagles? No. The Cowboys? No. We've seen that story a million times. Who in the NFC is gonna do that to them? The Lions? Hell no.
NFC is trash, man. That's what we've learned.
Yes, it honestly is. Like,
struggled in games against the AFC.
Because they're soft. The NFC is soft, really. The AFC is tough. Like, there's aggression. Like, that's real old school football. Like, that makes the Niners. That's why the Niners have been outclassing these guys. They're so freaking tough. And what's the one thing that the AFC North has always had through all of our lives is toughness. It's like, hey, they might suck. They might have a bunch of teams that suck. But one thing about them is like somehow they're always like aggressive. Like all of them, especially all the old school Ravens, Steelers lineup matchups, even the Bengals, occasionally the Browns, and especially now the Browns are good again the last 5 years. So, that's one thing that the division has always had, and that team, especially the Ravens, is they're always tough. A John Harbaugh-led team is tough as hell.
This is a side note, but I cannot believe the Browns are without Nick Chubb. Imagine if they had Nick Chubb this year. Like, they're actually doing like fairly well. That's kind of crazy. I felt like when Nick Chubb went out and Deshaun Watson sucked after they gave him $20 million, $200 million. I like how I said 20 million to try to exaggerate. Then I was
Talk
like,
about the
wait,
worst
that's
contract
actually
ever.
sorry, not to go on a Browns tangent. I was just thinking about how physical and tough they are, and I'm like, they're literally missing their star running back. How crazy. But no, it does feel like, and you watch boxing? UFC. So maybe you can do this analogy better, but it does feel like in this conference, the 49ers are like the big rough and tough bullies, and we can go through all the playoff teams that they might face. And I can give, it's any given Sunday. So obviously the 49ers could lose, but you think if the 49ers play decent, that they would have no problem winning just because they're so much more built around physicality than the majority of these top teams in the NFC. But then you go over to the AFC and it feels like, and I don't know if I'm doing this analogy right, but it feels like someone like going into a different weight class or something. Like they're like, oh, I'm beating up on all these guys, so I'm like gonna get promoted to this next level, if I'm playing a video game or something.
Yeah,
And
that kind of makes sense. Yeah, I would more so say like, and I've said this before: styles make fights. It's like sometimes the jiu-jitsu guy is not gonna do well against the boxer or vice versa, whatever. Like everything's like, and I think that's one thing about the 49ers. Like, hey, who's there? Who's an opponent that can stay and stand with us? It feels like if anything, not in weight class, it's like UFC versus Bellator. If any fighters know, like UFC, Bellator are two different companies, and it's like, oh yeah, like Niners are in Bellator, but once you get to the UFC, aka the AFC, another company that with much like that's when it's. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to overhype the AFC either. It's not like they have amazing players or amazing teams. It's really kind of Ravens and Browns defensively. The Chiefs are starting to lose some luster.
I still
But
think the 49ers are the more talented team. Like the reason that I
they
said
are.
can the 49ers beat the Ravens if they meet up again? I think if the 49ers played that game, now let's not even talk about the Super Bowl, but just that game, they played it 10 times. I think the 49ers could have won 6 to 7 times. Like the
Yeah,
49ers had to have
I like it.
such a bad game. Like Randy is in the chat and he's saying, we beat the crap out of ourselves basically. And he's and Douglas says the 49ers beat themselves. Disagree with the blueprint comment. And then Randy also says, like, I don't want to sound stupid like the people who gave up after 3 losses. We're just pointing out like we're rightfully critiquing the 49ers after a bad game, but I don't think Jose and I both think that the 49ers are gonna, I mean, they're already in the playoffs, but I think as long as they play up to at least part of their standard that they're going to, go probably far in the playoffs. What we're comparing them to is like, can they win the Super Bowl? But I think even in this Ravens game, like they had to play so bad. Like this was not like a hard fought game that the 49ers really showed up for. To me, I mean, when you throw that many interceptions, Ryan Hensley, I asked him because he's always giving out stats. If you have like 2 turnovers, your
Yeah, he said
chances
like
of winning the
90% or
game
something
is
like
like
that.
90% or something. Like it's like it gets catapulted down when the 49ers, all their losses, they've lost the turnover battle. So if the 49ers can protect the football, which needs to be, hey, Brock Purdy, don't be a doofus. Hey, I know that you want to be a game changer, not a game manager. You're doing great, buddy. You're the last pick in the draft. We're in the MVP conversation for a reason. I don't even think that was like not, something that he should have been in. I think he was in that conversation for a reason. But what he needs to realize is like, this is not about your big giant arm. This is about you consistently making the right decisions. You and I, Jose and I have talked about that before. The thing with Brock Purdy is his ability to consistently put the ball in the correct place, and he just did not do that at all yesterday. But I think if he I think if they throw 2 interceptions, they can win that game. It was just the fact that they
Not
never
against that
settled
team.
in. Brock Purdy did not. Kyle Shanahan did not. Don't you think that if Kyle Shanahan would have changed the game plan, like, I thought that they could have won coming out of that third.
I wanted to see more runs in the first half specifically. And again, like I said, the fact that they scored that first touchdown going with McCaffrey as the lead in that drive showed enough. That's like, why are we not doing this more? I mean, and then after that, it's like, look, you scored a touchdown because you actually went to your real MVP, not the quarterback, because that he pretty much is the MVP to me. Well, not Lamar, but, to me, he's always been the lead over Brock Purdy. But no, to me, I feel like there's too much. And I think like the commenters and you can't, it's not just so much the 49ers that just sucked. It's like, dude, the Ravens went out there and did that. They did that. Like as fluky as like, yeah.
I like what you're doing. You're like refocusing themselves.
Yes. That's why I like saying like the percentage wise, 75% Ravens, 25% 49ers. And even if you have that 25%, it's probably a score of like what, 35-28, maybe 35-31. It's closer. Yeah. But I mean, look, the consensus seems to be 3 picks were fluky. I like to think 2 of them were, because one of them, Brock Purdy, was doing too much on the scrambling and was throwing to a draped up George Kittle, which again, that's the one it's like, hey, if one way or the other, I see it. And I think it's no debate. The first pick in the red zone was egregious because you took off at least 3 points on the board, probably a touchdown because the way you were driving, and it pretty much was, yeah, you took off 3 points to a touchdown off the board in the red zone. So that's so egregious. And the other 3 are like everyone says, fluky or lucky. And it's like, hey, it's fluky and lucky. But again, look at what happened. Cornerback blitz. What do you do in that situation? Apparently the consensus is you have to still throw it and try to make it over him. Well, he didn't do it. The cornerback made a hell of a play, set up his teammate to make the pick. Boom. Ravens did a fantastic job on that play call and executing. Ravens did that. That wasn't bad luck. Third play, if you want to say the fluky way, like, okay, Kittle probably gets, I don't know what happened, if the defender made a play by pass breaking it or just like, either way, the fact that Purdy's throwing that with the receiver draped on Kittle, the defender made that drop pass happen, made that tip pass happen, and Kyle Hamilton being able to still track the ball, and they showed on the TV, he got laid out, and he gets up and still makes a play. Boom, Ravens again. And then, the fourth one, we already know, like, he got smacked, so good on you to pressure him and for you guys to be in the position to pick it off. So at some point, it's like, even run game in the second half wasn't too efficient. I mean, it was fine, but it was like, God damn, what did they even do? And how many times were screen passes getting snuffed out? Like, they knew everything. It's like they were in the huddle. So to me, it's like, dude, you guys just got worked and outclassed. And it wasn't so much your fault. It was just the other team was just better than you on that day. Because again, as the question says, can they win if they meet again? Absolutely they can. I think now the fact that you had this preview and this look, it's like now like, okay, now we know we have to really lock in and take these guys seriously. Luckily, they'll have 2 weeks to prepare for that if they get to that point to face the Super Bowl. You'll have that rest. You'll have that game time to prep. And that way you won't have to necessarily force yourself into throwing so much heavy passes. It just felt like you should have been more balanced in that game. Because the fact that you went so pass heavy, I think the Ravens kind of expected that, and that's what forced you to put in that situation. That's why, to me, if anyone's at fault more in this game, it's probably Kyle Shanahan for that sense, for doing all that, for not putting enough. But, at the end of the day, I'm going to give more credit to the Ravens than the Niners messing up. Because did the Niners mess up? Yes, but I think the Ravens are just amazing. That was a huge statement win for them.
This is such a side note, so we're going to spend no time on it. But I do think it's interesting. I think that I hate to even bring him up because I feel like it incites stuff. But if Trey Lance was out there and threw some of those interceptions, Brock Purdy, I've never realized this about him, but he has a really big windup. Some of those things where the ball was getting kind of thrown erratically was because defenders were able to hit the ball as he was kind of throwing it way back there. I remember on one of the replays with my dad, he was pointing it out. He was like, dang, Brock Purdy is holding it back there for a while. I never realized that. So hopefully that's more of an off-season thing. He's not going to be able to fix it now. But it was just something that I heard someone was in the chat talking about critiques, and I just